Welcome to Cleveland Conversations. I'm your host, Ed Horowitz. One of the founding principles of the United States is freedom of speech. Yet we have a long history of wrestling with what this freedom actually means. And from our nation's early days, the discussion of important and difficult ideas in the public sphere has helped Americans of all stripes learn, think, and deliberate more deeply. The City Club of Cleveland has been a center point of this since its founding in 1912 and has been referred to as America's citadel of free speech. Its mission? To create conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. However, in the last few years, we've seen a growing, hyper-polarized environment in the country that has made civil conversation turn into highly volatile shouting matches, be it in social media, be it at school board meetings, even across the dining room table with our own relatives. How does the City Club of Cleveland provide an independent, free speech forum that fosters conversation and productive, civilized ideas and discussions that help us understand the issues facing our country? Well, who better to discuss this than the CEO of the City Club, Dan Moulthrop. For the past 11 years, Dan has been the CEO of the City Club after many years as a member and frequent forum moderator. Prior to joining the City Club, he co-founded the Civic, a pioneer in the field of social media for public civic engagement. From 2005 to 2010, Dan was the host of Sound of Ideas on IdeaStream Public Media. Dan is also an award-winning journalist and a former high school teacher. Welcome to Cleveland Conversations, Dan.
Thanks, Ed. Pleasure to be here.
So, City Club does play an important role. We live in a society where conversations are really hard. If someone comes to one of the City Club events, one of the City Club presentations, how do you foster that idea of discussion, and what's the mission of your club when we say to help democracy thrive?
So there are a few questions in there, Ed. I'll try and take them one at a time, but probably the best example of what happens and how we create a space for civil civic dialogue, and mostly really I want to focus on the civil part of that. The best example is a few weeks ago at the end of June 2024, where we are right now, when we hosted some members of Cleveland's Palestinian immigrant and Palestinian American community for a conversation about the war in Gaza. And it was a conversation that we knew we would eventually have since October 8th, basically, since the day after the Hamas attack on Israel. And it wasn't clear to me for a while how we would have that conversation or what would happen. But in the end, on that at that forum towards the end of June, when we had a moderator and two members of the Palestinian community here speaking, one of whom is a professor here at Cleveland State University, there were probably 200 or so people in the room, and probably 40% of them were from our Jewish community here. And before the forum started, if you go to watch the forum, you wouldn't have seen this, but before forums start, one of us on staff will be up on stage to welcome everybody informally and say thank you to our sponsors and stuff like that. And when it's necessary, we use that as an opportunity to kind of set the stage and set expectations and remind people why we're here. And we did that in that case. And I explained to everybody, look, we're about to have a really tough conversation. But we're having this tough conversation because it's necessary. It is something we are here to do, to build bridges. And all of us have come here today to hear this conversation. And there may be moments when you're uncomfortable, when what's said on the stage makes you upset. And if that's the case, you don't actually have to stay in the room. You can quietly leave, and we set up a room just outside the forum for people who might need some quiet, a respite from the tension of the conversation. And I will tell you, it was one of the toughest conversations and most difficult forums we have ever put on. And it was not flawless by any stretch of the imagination. But at the end, our panelists were given a standing ovation from a room that was not entirely in their favor, if you know what I mean. It was a standing ovation based on empathy and compassion, based on people having understood that in spite of the difference of opinions and the vastly different worldview, there were human beings, and we established a human connection there.
Sure.
And I think that's fundamentally at the heart of what we do. And there have been moments over the last 11 years that I've been at the City Club where we've had some, where it hasn't been quite so compassionate or empathetic. But I'm very proud of what we did that day and what we were able to accomplish. And I don't think there's any, you take Israel and Hamas, there's no issue in America that is more inflamed or more polarized than what's happening in the Middle East right now. It makes our sort of inter-party differences seem relatively minor.
Sure. But so you did a good job trying to organize in such a contentious issue where people are very inflamed about that, and it can be difficult to have that kind of conversation. So congratulations on that. That's great that you are able to do that. So that's not all of the topics aren't as contentious as that, right? You have things that are, I'm not going to say they're lighter, but they're certainly less controversial issues, perhaps, right? Can you tell our audience a little bit about some of the other topics, like recently that you've done? Well,
right now we're in the midst of the summer series that we do on the Plaza at Playhouse Square. I'm gesturing towards the Plaza at Playhouse Square, and those are free conversations. Tomorrow it's with artists who are a part of the Borderlight Festival of International and Fringe Theater. Last week we had a conversation about diversity in the film and media production industry, of interest to all of those in the room with us today. And the first one we had was an interview with the new executive director of the Cleveland Markets Corporation, the nonprofit that's running the West Side Market.
Right.
And then we have another one coming up about housing and the housing crisis in Cleveland, and which is sort of the crisis is created in part by the fact that there are so many out-of-town landlords who have invested kind of nefariously in our real estate market. We do just about, if there's an issue that you or your audience cares about, chances are we are either planning a forum on it or we've recently done a forum on it.
So everything from politics, controversial issues, science, arts, entertainment, local issues,
One of my
everything.
favorite forums from the last few months, apart from the one I just mentioned, was an interview that we did with Terrence Blanchard, the 8-time Grammy Award-winning jazz composer and artist. And that was because he was in town for the Cleveland Orchestra's Humanities Festival, performing as part of that. And we were able to get him for an interview and forum, and it was and he was talking about what it's like to score films for Spike Lee and how collaboration with Spike Lee happens. It was like fantastic.
Great.
And not controversial at all.
Right.
Just a sheer joy to be in the room with him.
So tell folks how, the City Club, if they're interested in attending one of these events or they're interested in watching one of the events, I know, they can attend in person. They're also available on your website. Tell us more about how they can participate.
All the information is at cityclub.org, which is our website and has been our website since we got onto the web. And all of our events are open to the general public. So you don't have to be a member to buy a ticket. Anybody can buy a ticket. Members do get a discount and that unmistakable feeling of being a part of something bigger than yourself, which, if I could, just reference Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone. I mean, part of the reason we do what we do, part of the reason it's so important is that these civic associations, being a part of something, is so important to the strength of democracy and so important to your own mental health, for that matter.
Right, building connections in these types of ways.
But 100% of our programs are also live streamed on our website, and there's no paywall, and you can also find all of the archives for in recent years. 100% of the archives are right there on our website as well. Other archives, some of the older material, is either on our website or you can find it in the Cleveland Memory Collection at the Michael Schwartz Library here at Cleveland State.
Okay, and are they on the radio anymore? Are they on public television as well?
We've had a live radio broadcast, Ed, of our weekly forums since 1928.
So those are 12 o'clock on Fridays?
I just want to repeat that. Since 1928. We're here in the School of Communications. But 1928 was 2 years after radio was introduced to the Cleveland market, and less than a decade after radio was introduced to the planet.
Right.
And we had it started with a live radio broadcast. At the time, if you were listening on the radio, if you're one of the few lucky families to have a wireless at home, you could phone in your question. And our switchboard operator, our secretary, whoever it was who was answering the phone, would write it down and hand it off to somebody who would then, read it into the record and get an answer for you. Because the second half of every program is, of course, devoted to audience questions.
Okay.
So think about that. Since 1928, and then eventually, the 2000s come along, 2010, 2013, I come to City Club. We start taking questions via Twitter. Right, we're always trying to innovate. We've been podcasting, but a live radio broadcast of our weekly forums for 96 years. I mean, I think that's bananas.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Cutting edge technology of the 1920s. So
exactly.
Super important. Yeah. And so people can buy tickets online. They can join. They can watch. They can see.
Exactly.
Everything is available. So even if they can't attend, they can participate in these
Always.
other ways.
Right now, we gave up Twitter because it's a kind of a It's not fun anymore.
Sure.
But you can submit questions via text message now.
Okay. So that sounds good. About how many forums do you do a year?
We do about 100 programs a year. People tend to know us for the Friday Forum because for as long as they've been alive, they've heard a Friday Forum on Fridays, or they've watched it on Sunday mornings on WVIZ. We do programs other days of the week. First Wednesday of every month from September to June, we're at the Happy Dog with a free program. We have these programs on Wednesdays this summer in the plaza at Playhouse Square, which are free as well. You can bring your own lunch, or you can buy it at a food truck. And we'll do, occasionally programs will be in the morning, or they'll be in the evening, depending on speakers' availability and when they can appear with us. When we had Joe Manchin several months ago, when he was Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, the former Democrat, when he was toying with the idea of running for the White House, he launched a very brief listening tour, made it to Cleveland and Columbus, and then the day after that he announced he wasn't going to run. But yeah, we had him for a breakfast forum, which was quite fun.
And you also have a student program for high school students?
We do, and for college students, by the way, all of you here in the room, I think you're college students, most of you, and college students can attend for $5. So student pricing for college students. High school students can attend for free. We raise money every year to support that, but we think it is vitally important to welcome students into civic life and to provide them with not just a seat at the table, but also a voice in the conversation.
So if there are any teachers watching, they can take a look at the website, find out more information about bringing a class in, or
we get a lot of high school teachers, and from the Cleveland schools out to Aurora or Westlake or Lorraine. We welcome high school classes all the time.
Right. So again, if they want to watch, internet, website,
all of it's cityclub.org.
WVIZ on Sunday mornings. And Fridays on Idea Stream on the radio, 89.7.
And also live streamed on our website.
And live streamed on the website. So lots of opportunities for everybody to participate.
Yes.
Okay,
there are no barriers to entry.
Great. So let's go back a little bit. You already talked about the introduction of the radio and how you were cutting edge technology back then, which I love that story. So in this early 1900s, we're in the progressive era of America, and city clubs are popping up in New York and Chicago and Boston, here as well, of course, right? And everyone is this idea that we can make our communities better by having these conversations. So was the City Club part of that movement? Is that how it began?
It was indeed, but it was actually one of the last to be established. So the City Club of Portland, Oregon is a little younger than us. They were established in 1916. We were established in 1912. Many of them had come along at the end of the 19th century and the first decade of the 20th century. We were modeled after the City Club of St. Louis. There was a graduate student. This all comes back to students and student engagement, right? There was a graduate student at Western Reserve named Mayo Fessler, who had been a member of the City Club of St. Louis. And he brought the idea to his professor, a fellow named Augustus Hatton. Professor Hatton loved the idea. He said, I know a bunch of guys downtown who will love this. So he reaches out to Newton D. Baker, who was then mayor, or law director probably at the time under Tom L. Johnson, and was about to become mayor in 1912. And Judge Carl Friebelin, and it was a
big names of that time.
Big names of that time, a really diverse group of lawyers, jurists, newspapermen, and businessmen primarily. But really, I got to call out the legal community. Without the legal community, I don't think the City Club would be the City Club, and I don't think it would have lasted for as long as it has. But those folks really, banded together. They loved the idea, and it was in October of 1912 that they had a meeting, and 70 of them, roughly 70 of them, each bought a $10 share in the City Club.
Oh.
And so with $700 or so, they kickstarted the City Club.
Okay, that's great. Great.
Yeah.
So a lot, which was a lot of money back at that
seriously,
point. That was not a little bit.
Yeah.
So you've had many people come through over these almost 100 years that you've been around, presidents and candidates. And in the 1960s, I know you had a lot of interesting people come, including Governor George Wallace. So tell me about that. That's one of the most interesting stories, right?
George Wallace is one of these fascinating moments in the City Club history. And for those who don't know, Wallace had been governor of Alabama, very famously segregationist and racist, frankly. He was the governor who opposed integration and ran on a segregation now, segregation always sort of platform. By the late 60s, however, he's trying to rehabilitate his reputation and is going around the country speaking and trying to present a softer, kinder version of himself.
This is before he was shot or after he was?
Honestly, I'm really not sure, because
okay,
I'm not as good as history. I know enough to be able to tell these stories, Ed, but come on.
All right, so what happened?
Okay, so anyway,
so he's coming to
rehabilitate Wallace is coming
his
to Cleveland, and there are people in Cleveland who are losing their minds over this. They're really angry. How dare the City Club bring this racist, politician to Cleveland? And there are City Club members who are upset, threatening to resign over it, that kind of thing. The day of the event, and you can find photos of this in the Cleveland Memory Collection at Cleveland State here in the Michael Schwartz Library. The day of the event, there's protests, and you can see photos of people carrying pickets. And when you're protesting in the 60s, it's not like today where you can just like print out a sign or whatever, and there's not like cardboard boxes everywhere. It's you have to be a little more committed, right? You're getting a piece of wood and you're nailing something to it and you're painting the sign yourself. And these signs say, Wallace, go home. And then there's counter-protesters too, say like Cleveland is Wallace country.
Wow. And
in these photos that you see too, there's maybe a dozen protesters and counter-protesters outside the City Club when we were on Short Vincent Street. And then there's police around them. And then there's probably like 100 people across the street watching. Say, what's happening? It's like at the RNC when there would be like a few, like one guy burning a flag, 8 people getting really mad at him, 16 police officers with bikes, and then all the press and everybody outside that. 5 minutes before the program's about to start, the forum's about to start, all of these protesters just put down their signs and they walk in and buy a ticket and they sit down for lunch, and then they listen to George Wallace speak. Wow. Quietly, with civility. And then during the Q&A, they eviscerate him. They just take him to task. And it was shortly after that Wallace realized that like his reputation was not going to be capable of rehabilitating his reputation. But that's the sort of thing the City Club does, right? That like you might hear somebody that you detest or somebody whose views you find abhorrent, but you can do that and listen to it without being threatened, because you understand the force of your own conviction. Right. And you're not threatened by somebody else's ideas, and you can simply engage with those ideas and ask them tough questions. That's what we stand for. When George W. Bush spoke in 2006, and Jan Roller, who had been our board president, asked a question of George W. Bush about the book American Theocracy by Kevin Phillips, and really framed it in a way, because she's a lawyer, framed it in this way that meant that whatever way he answered, he was going to be angering somebody. Well, that moment wound up on The Daily Show, and that's sort of what we do. Our members hold power to account when that's necessary. Our members engage with civility and compassion and empathy, but also with respect for the ideas and without fear of the ideas. Right. And I think that's a beautiful thing when it can happen.
So with having those things it's unusual, especially in our day and age where people aren't necessarily, they're looking at headlines, they're seeing things that are coming through social media, there's lots of conspiracy theories and fake information. Here's an opportunity to sit down, hear from somebody themselves. I always feel, to me, there is a value on hearing somebody speaking directly, if you're in the audience, rather than, recordings are good, but also just being there in the room, because you're paying attention a lot more than you would if you're just, watching a program, watching something on YouTube. There's nothing like it, right? Right. So everyone there gets an opportunity perhaps to ask a question if they can, if they're interested in, so that creates that kind of dialogue. Is there discussion between the members there as well?
I mean, what happens a lot, and you don't see this on when you're watching the video or watching on television or listening to the radio, you definitely don't see it. But afterwards, people are hanging out. They're talking to each other about what was just said. They're visiting with one another. They're creating these connections and these strong social ties. They're meeting one another. Sometimes they're introducing themselves to one another. And things grow out of these connections, which I think is just one of the most exciting things. And often we have no idea what's actually happening.
Right.
But I hear these stories every now and then. Somebody will tell me, a county council member told me recently about a forum that he had attended that was about bail reform. And he said, I didn't really understand it until I'd heard a lot about it. People talked to me about it, but I came to your forum, I listened to the speaker, and my eyes were opened, and now we're investing in the bail project. And we're going to invest even more. And that's because he was in the room, right? Because when you're watching when you're having your lunch and you're watching the video or the live stream from your desk, you're doing 8 other things probably too. Right. And you're not paying that as close attention. You're paying enough attention to be able to send an email to the speaker, say, caught you, it was great. But being in the room is special. It's different.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. So you used to be, you said, on Short Vincent Street. Now you're in the Idea Stream building, right?
No, we're 2 doors down from the Idea Stream building.
2 doors down.
Clearly, Ed, you need to visit us more.
Why
we're just down the street from where we're sitting.
What made you decide to move to this more central location near the Chandelier on Euclid Avenue? So,
really, it was to be closer to the School of Communications at Cleveland State University.
Okay, that's a plus.
Just a little bit closer. The opportunity came about because it's frankly it's a COVID silver lining story. COVID has changed the office environment everywhere on the planet, and the space we were in had been used for commercial office space. Originally, it was designed for retail space, and it hadn't really served that purpose for a decade or so or more. But during COVID, it was empty because the previous occupant, Dwellworks, had sent their employees home, and then they evolved into a hybrid workplace, and they didn't need as much space as they had both the second and first floor. They no longer needed it all, so they were consolidating up to the second floor, which made the first floor available to us. It was our time at 850 Euclid. You think about the corner of 9th and Euclid, and that was, for a time, in downtown Cleveland, the corner of Main Street and Main Street.
Sure.
Right? It was the most important. You had the Union Commerce Building, which people think of as the Huntington Building, the very large 1.4 million square feet of office that had every law firm, every accounting firm. EY used to be in there. All of the law firms used to be in there, and the banks, right? And then you had the PNC Building, which had been the National City headquarters prior to that, across the street. You had the AmTrust Building, which, and the Cleveland Trust Rotunda. And then you had our building and the Schofield Building next to it. That was really an important corner.
Yeah.
But a lot of those buildings are no longer full, and things have shifted downtown. Arts and culture is really driving, arts and culture, broadly speaking, is really driving downtown in a lot of ways. It's become a much more, I won't say it's driving everything, but it's a much more important, it's grown in its importance over the years. And when I say arts and culture, I don't just mean what's happening at Playhouse Square, but I also mean the sports that drive a lot of downtown activity. And so it wasn't a hard decision to make, to move from a second-story location that was hard to find in a place that had less activity than it used to a first-floor location in the most dynamic neighborhood in downtown.
That's great.
It's great. Yeah. And Playhouse Square is a fantastic partner. We are basically, our location is kind of where Cleveland State kind of overlaps with Playhouse Square because of the presence of the arts programming in the Middo building around the corner, and the film school, the film and television school.
You're in the heart of it all now.
We're in the heart of it all.
That's great. Yeah. What's your dream program? What's your dream forum, and what can our viewers look forward to in the fall? I'm assuming you're going to try and get Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno, our 2 U.S. Senate candidates, to come and speak there. other candidates as well coming up. But what's your ultimate, in the best of all worlds, I would love to get, this person or these two people come to face off against each other. What do you like to do?
We had Ronald Reagan was the first sitting U.S. president to speak at the City Club. He spoke in 1988. Mm-hmm. Barack Obama was the most recent sitting U.S. president to speak, and he spoke in 2015. The end of March 2015, something like that, towards the end of his second term. And we invited President Trump a couple of times, and he declined our invitation. And we've invited President Biden as well. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, really, in the next, we've got 6 months.
Right.
We've got five or 6 months. So let's see if we can get President Biden.
Sure.
That would be the dream.
Right. Some of our eagle-eye viewers might be noticing your lapel pin today, which is the City Club gong. Could you
get a zoom in on that?
So the City Club always you begin your forums by chiming of that gong. Tell us what the history of that is and what the reason for that is.
That was given to us by a City Club member in the 1930s when he returned. It's actually a Chinese dinner gong. Okay. And he brought it back from China as a gift and gave it as a gift to the City Club. I believe his last name was Siegelstein. Footnote, by the way, the City Club was established as a very, very inclusive place. And there were Jews who were members of the City Club in 1912 when it was established, which was not the case for most social clubs. Sure. And there were also black members of the City Club from the earliest days. Not a lot, but they were there. And I think that's sort of an important footnote. Mr. Siegelstein gave it to the City Club, and it has rung in every forum since then. And I mean, what's the purpose of it? It has this sort of talismanic effect, mm-hmm. right? You ring the gong, and it becomes a City Club forum. Mm-hmm. And you say, hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the City Club.
As opposed to all of us getting together for a beautiful lunch that they
as
have.
Opposed to just like wrapping a gavel on the desk or something like that. It calls people to attention. It welcomes people, and it is the sound of kind of conversation ringing, right? It's identifiable. Right. And I think because of its tone, because it's so recognizable, and because actually of the importance of our radio broadcast, it has become our symbol, like our logo, our mark. Yeah, because people hear that. People hear that and they're like, oh, it's a City Club. This is what's happening. Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah. So I know upcoming, we have the State of the County with Chris Ronayne is coming up. We also have the State of the Great Lakes coming up. That's right. So trying to understand, both our own county and our shore line, trying to understand those things. So covering almost everything we could do. We try to. We absolutely try to. And we also will be announcing shortly the State of the Schools, which is a conversation, with Dr. Warren Morgan mm-hmm. of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. And as you referenced earlier, some political things coming up as well. Yeah. It's a little bit of a exciting political moment. So you're a former journalist. You you were a host of IdeaStream for a number of years. Now you do this. I mean, you seem to be you're pretty well connected. You have a good pulse on how this city's doing. You said you understand how it's growing. You know how it's doing better. But you also realize some of the challenges that our city, our county, our state is still facing because you're in touch with all the people who are coming through the forums, right? Yeah, I mean, I think of it as part of my job to stay current. And more than just current, I mean, I read the news, I read a lot of news, but also to stay connected with people who are trying to make changes in our community, trying to improve our community in big ways and small, mm-hmm. right, at the neighborhood level and also at the systemic level. Right. So, it's a really important thing that we do. And if there's any viewers who are watching this, they're like, I would love to see this person come to the City Club. Well, here's a topic that I think, I wonder if you've ever called. They could look, but if they have an idea, can they contact you guys and let them know? Yeah, info@cityclub.org is an easy email address to remember. I get program ideas from everybody all the time. I mean, literally, you haven't mentioned one yet, but you probably will when this is over. And I get them through direct messages on Instagram. I get them through text messages from friends and other people who have my cell number, but I just about thousands of people have my cell number. And I get them from family members, and I get them from strangers at Heinen's, like all of it. Right, so, coming all over. Yeah. So hopefully, people who it's possible they may not have heard of the City Club before watching this program.
Shocked.
But they can learn more about this and continue this. So how would you take the City Club to your own life? So if you're watching, you're participating, what can you do what would you recommend to help continue bridging those gaps in between conversations or in day-to-day activities? When we're all struggling, where it's easy to just send an angry tweet or something out on social media, that's easy, right? When we're enraged, we're engaged. But you are asking us to not be engaged. You're asking us to think, ponder, and deliberate.
Yeah, you can be enraged. There's a lot to get angry about, but the strength of our democracy is contingent on the strength of the bonds that we share with one another.
Right.
Right? Politics is, I don't know who said this, it's probably Winston Churchill or something like that, but I love this idea that politics is what we do so we don't kill each other, so we don't go to war.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When politics failed, that's when we had a civil war. Mm-hmm. Right? We forget that this is all this because it's so historical. It seems like it's in the past, and we can take our democracy for granted if we're not careful.
Yeah.
But politics is essentially about compromise, and sometimes it's about wheeling and dealing, and can be very transactional. But it's also about saying, like, what is it that you and I both want, mm-hmm. and what are the things that you're willing to give up to get some portion of the things that you want. And that's how we steadily improve the community. That's how progress happens. That's how we create the kind of future that we want to live in. Mm-hmm. And you and I we're both like, aging Jews, right? Aging bald Jews, right? But there's probably a bunch of things we don't agree on, But but there's also a bunch of things that we do agree on.
Right.
And they're focusing on what we agree on, focusing on what we can get done, and not letting perfect be the enemy of good enough is so vitally important.
Yeah, I could not agree with it. And that is a very positive way to end our program today. I want to thank Dan Moulthrop.
It's done already?
It's done already.
I have so much more to say.
I know. I want to thank Dan Moulthrop for being our guest. You can learn more about the City Club at cityclub.org. Listen on the Friday Forum. Turn on your television, PBS Idea Stream on Sunday mornings, and you will definitely learn, think, and be engaged. I'm Ed Horowitz. Thank you for watching Cleveland Conversations.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Dan.